know everything to share part of your experience. I don't know how he healed me, but I know this. Once I was blind and now I see. Actually, the man did answer the story. How did he heal you? Well, he put mud in my eye. We're going to read John chapter 9. It's most of the chapter. But I was just thinking, when we used to go to church camp, we liked to act out Bible stories. And they'd get the tallest kid, and he'd be Goliath, and David would get his sling and hit him with, and he'd fall down backwards. And John the Baptist. And remember when Herod's daughter danced for him, stepdaughter, and he said, "I'll give you anything you want. What do you want?" She said, "The head of John the Baptist on a platter." So we'd get a table and put some platter with the bottom cut out and ketchup on it. I don't remember we ever acted out this. Have somebody spit on the ground and make mud and put it in his eyes. And why did Jesus do that? I don't know for sure. It may have been just a way of communicating with the man. It may have been a test in his faith. There may be something else going on. I do know one thing. John, the evangelist, the writer of the gospel, has an interest in the humanity of Jesus. He wants us to know that Jesus was a real person, a real man, a real human. And he shares our human nature to the point of getting thirsty, getting tired, getting hungry, and even being able to spit on the ground. There were people in John's day that thought that Jesus was kind of a phantom. They believed he had divine powers, he was God with us, but not human. And some people said when he walked, he didn't leave footprints. And John said, no, he had every human attribute we all do. Well, anyway, that's kind of it's part of the message. That is the way Jesus chose to heal. John chapter 9. Oh, I started early, but I hadn't got there yet. John chapter 9, 1 through 41. The readings are a little bit longer this month, but maybe the sermon will be correspondingly shorter. Maybe it'll balance out. But they're narratives, Bible stories. This one, the story of Jesus healing on the Sabbath day and the controversy that followed. As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus. "But this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." After saying this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. "Go," he told them, "wash in the pool of Siloam." This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, "Isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg?" Some claimed that he was. Others said, "No, he only looks like him." But he himself insisted, "I am the man." "How then were your eyes open?" they asked him. He replied, "The man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see." "Where is this man?" they asked him. "I don't know," he said. They brought the Pharisees They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Sabbath. Therefore the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. He put mud in my eyes, the man replied, and I washed, and now I see. Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." But others asked, "How can a sinner perform such signs?" So they were divided. They turned again to the blind man. "What have you to say about him?" "It was your eyes he opened." And the man replied, "He is a prophet." They still did not believe that he'd been blind and had received his sight until they sent for the man's parents. "Is this your son?" they asked. "Is this the one you say was born blind? How is it that he can see?" "We know he is our son," the parents answered. "And we know that he was born blind. But how he can see now, or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He's of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who already had decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. That was why his parents said, "He's of age. Ask him." The second time they summoned the man who'd been blind. "Give glory to God by telling the truth," they said. "We know this man is a sinner." He replied, "Whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see." And then they asked him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" And he answered, "I have already told you, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?" Then they hurled insults at him and said, "You are this fellow's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from." The man answered, "Now that is remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly person who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." To this they replied, "You were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us?" And they threw him out. Jesus heard that they'd thrown him out, and when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" "Who is he, sir?" the man asked. "Tell me so that I may believe in him." And Jesus said, "You have now seen him. In fact, he's the one speaking with you." Then the man said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshiped him. Jesus said, "For judgment I've come into the world so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind." Some Pharisees who were with him heard him say this and asked, "What? Are we blind too?" Jesus said, "If you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim to see, your guilt remains." Sometimes we get the wrong answer because we're asking the wrong questions. The disciples of Jesus, the question that came to them, who's to blame, whose fault it is? But I've just observed in life that often when two people have a disagreement, they're asking the wrong question. I have observed many disagreements among people, and I've been a part of some of them. And I think so often when there's a problem, the question's, Whose fault is it? Who can we blame? A more productive question is, how do we solve this problem? If you start out trying to find who to blame, that's never going to solve the problem. It's just going to cause hostility. Whose fault is it? We ask the wrong questions because we have some wrong assumptions. Number one, people assume suffering is always the result of sin. And that's what Jesus' disciples taught. He taught them a lot of things, but I guess they hadn't figured out this lesson. Sometimes bad things happen to good people. Sometimes there's suffering in the world. And they assumed that everything that happened, God caused it directly and immediately. Now, God's the creator of everything and it works everywhere. So you can't say it's an accident, God didn't know about it. But it's not necessarily a punishment. But it's an assumption that many of us share. Suffering is always the result of sin. Suffering is punishment. Sinners deserve to be punished, and we get what we deserve in this life. That last assumption is the one they were missing. We don't always get what we deserve in life. So sometimes people do things to bring suffering on ourselves. That's true. Sometimes suffering is just, sometimes there's natural causes, physical or material causes. And sometimes God is at work in ways we don't understand. But the disciples, they assume suffering is the result of sin. So who did it? The guy was born blind. How could he be punished for something? Did he do something evil before he was born while he was an embryo, a fetus inside his mother's womb? That didn't make a lot of sense to him. So it must be the parents sinned, and God is punishing them by afflicting their child. And Jesus said, no, you've got it wrong. The parents didn't sin, and the man didn't sin. It happened so that God's glory would be revealed. Sometimes suffering is for the glory of God. Sometimes God has another purpose for it. So as Eddie mentioned, we went to the funeral of Larry Jones yesterday. It was a very nice, beautiful service. The building was filled. A lot of people came out, and that church is now a new church, so it's been, I guess, 6 years. And he had a lot of new friends. Larry was born without arms. Who sinned, his parents or him? Well, we do understand the physical causes. I think it was a result of some medication that the mother had taken, did not know that it caused birth defects. And he was born without arms. But it wasn't to punish the parents. It was so that God could be glorified through him. And there were so many testimonies about Sonia and I, way back we were sophomores in Bible college, and we served on the weekends as a youth ministry. And one of the first people we met was Larry. And so we came in the door, standing there at the door, and up pops his foot. Shook his foot. And then Sonia had a little brother at that time. And we'd take him to church. He was 4 or 5. And I remember him just looking, staring at. And then one time we went out with the kids, and Larry went along, and we went bowling. And we thought, how's he going to bowl? Well, he did need a little help. Somebody had to pick the ball up and set it down in the lane. And he'd get up there and hop on one foot and push it down there. And he'd usually get about 100. Sometimes he'd get 3 or 4 strikes in a row. And people talked about that. And he's not proud of his life he didn't rob trains, he just stole one. And people would ask him about that. And he'd say, that was before I knew the Lord. But he was famous for that. But Larry was friendly. He was an honorary deacon in the church. After we went bowling, we went to Dairy Queen. Antonia's little brother, when he propped his leg up on the counter and eating the ice cream sundae, holding the spoon in his toes. And my brother-in-law, eyes wide open. But Larry was a blessing to that whole community and to the church. And we were glad that he'd made new friends in a short time. God was glorified in that service yesterday and in the life of Larry. So the question to ask is not always whose fault is it, who's to blame. I mean, it's one thing to take responsibility. If we've done something wrong, if we've made a mistake, we can own up to it, learn to do better. Sometimes you can make amends. Sometimes you can repair things that have been damaged. But that's not quite the same thing as trying to assign blame. Jesus put mud in his eyes. What a strange way of healing. But Jesus was a human like the rest of us, and Jesus did things to get people's attention. I think the next person that tried that, it probably didn't work. I don't think anybody else before or since ever healed blindness by putting mud in somebody's eyes. Sometimes we ask the wrong questions, and that keeps us from the truth that would help us. And so instead of saying, it's your fault, no, it's your fault, instead of trying to figure out whose fault it is, well, how can we work together to solve this problem? We sometimes ask the wrong questions because we have the wrong assumptions. The assumption everybody had back then was that sin is a direct punishment in every case. Another wrong assumption the Pharisees had was that tradition is a guarantee of truth. Tradition's a good thing. We don't have to decide now what time does church start this Sunday, and we don't have to ask questions like that. It's okay to follow traditions on some things, but when tradition keeps us from seeing the truth, it becomes a problem. The wrong assumption was that the truth is in the authority of the traditions, and it can keep us from seeing what's right in front of our eyes. And imagine this, here are these leaders of the Pharisees. Here's the man standing right in front of them. They just talked to his parents. He's our son. He was born blind. You can see that his eyes work now. And they were trying to say, they wanted to say it didn't happen. They said, you're lying. Everybody in town knew that man. Some people were so shocked, they said, well, maybe it's just his twin cousin or something. Uh, but no, right in front of them was the truth, and they wouldn't admit it. Fear is sometimes something that keeps us from asking the right question. The parents, they told the truth, they answered the questions they had to answer, but they didn't say any more because they were afraid. His own parents wouldn't really stand up for him because they were afraid. The other thing that comes out, asking the wrong questions because we have the wrong assumptions, there's another theme. And we saw it last week, and that's the theme of witness. A witness is simply someone that tells what they know. If you're called to court to be a witness, you tell them what you saw and heard, what happened to you. It's not your job to convince the jury. It's not your job to prove guilt or innocence, to deliver the verdict. It's just your job to tell what happened to you, what you saw and heard. And so in John chapter 4 from last Sunday, the woman at the well, she was a witness, and because of her testimony, people came to Jesus and then saw for themselves, and that whole village came to faith in Christ. And what did she say? She said, come and see. Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. And then she asked a question, could this be the Messiah. Said, "Come and see," and said, "Could this be?" I have a niece who's very good at asking questions. I don't spend much time on Facebook anymore for two reasons. One, my account got hacked, and I don't know whether it's me or not on there. It confused. I don't know whether it's myself or somebody else, but somebody hacked into it. I started getting friend requests from people that was already friends, and then I'd accept it, and pretty soon they'd say, "Have you gotten that free grant yet? You gotten that free money from the government?" I got $100,000. And so I'd start asking, "Do you remember when we met?" And they'd say, "Oh yeah, wasn't that great?" But I'd start asking specific questions, and that person didn't know me. And I couldn't figure out how to solve that problem. But the other thing, it seemed like everything, I'm not criticizing other people that use Facebook. There were some good things. We were able to keep track of people around the world. But it got to be arguing and name calling. And if you didn't agree with somebody, they'd unfriend you. And sometimes I'd have discussions with people and they'd turn into arguments. And so I just decided I didn't need to do that anymore. So that's why I don't spend too much time on it. We did start a new account that's called Sonia Mark. So if you see that, for right now, it's real as far as I know, and you can uh, send something to us. But we don't have to argue with people. We can be a witness. So my niece is very good at asking questions. If somebody says something provocative, instead of saying, "No, that's wrong," she'll say, "Well, how did you come to that view?" And that's a good question. And she asks other good questions like that. Uh, what convinced you of that? What's the evidence you see? Why do you think that's important? And sometimes asking questions of people opens their eyes to ask questions. Sometimes you learn something by asking questions. The woman at the well said, "Come and see." And she asked four questions. Could this be? And that implied, you decide for yourself. And they did. And then the man born blind, they said, "He's a sinner. How could he heal you if he's..." I don't know about that. I don't know whether he's a sinner or not. All I know is I was blind and now I see. And you don't have to argue with people. You can be a witness by simply saying, "Come and see. This is what I found. This is what happened to me. This is what faith means to me." Or you can say, "Come to our church and see. There's some good people there. And you might learn something, and it's meant a lot to me." A witness is just someone that tells what their experience is. Begin walking with Christ, and you'll see what he can do. I know most of you have already done that. If you've already done that, it's always good to renew. But if you haven't really begun a walk with Christ, it's always good to start. Come and see. Find out what the Lord can do in your life. He might put mud in your eyes, but he'll wash it out. He does that. Jesus might surprise you, and he might take you on some unexpected adventures. We'll come to our hymn of commitment, and that is, "Come, everyone who's thirsty." Let's all stand and sing.